Okay, so what if I told you that the most profound knowledge in the world had no author? That's the idea we're going to dive into today. We're going to use this really ancient framework to ask some incredibly modern questions about where knowledge truly comes from.
Let's start with what seems like a pretty simple question. The Vedas, right? They're some of the oldest sacred texts on the planet. This huge collection of hymns, philosophy, you name it. But when you ask the question, who actually wrote them? Well, the traditional answer is probably not what you're expecting.
That's right. No one. According to the tradition itself, the Vedas have no author. They weren't cooked up by some brilliant person or even a whole committee of wise sages. And get this isn't some historical mystery like we just lost the records. It's a core philosophical statement about what knowledge even is.
So how can a text not have an author? How does that work? That's what we're going to unpack first, this whole concept of unauthored, eternal knowledge.
The Sanskrit term for this is aparusha, which literally means not of human origin. It's the key concept here. The idea is that the Vedas aren't a product of some person's brilliant mind. They're something that exists completely separate from us.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The source material suggests that when something is created, its knowledge is created right along with it. Think about it. Like an electron. Nobody had to program an electron to have a negative charge. That property is just part of what it is. In the same way, this philosophy sees knowledge as a fundamental part of reality itself.
And you can see this idea beautifully in the symbolism. In traditional art, the creator god, Brahma, is shown holding the 4 Vedas. They're like the infinite blueprint for the entire universe, and his wife, Saraswati, is the goddess of knowledge. It shows you that creation and knowledge aren't two separate things. They're two sides of the very same coin.
Okay, so if this knowledge is just kind of out there in the cosmos, how did it end up in books that we can actually read? You know, how does something infinite get turned into something finite? That's the big question for our next section.
This is the perfect analogy from our source material, and it's just so powerful. Gravity didn't just pop into existence when an apple fell on Newton's head, right? The force was always there. It's a fundamental law of the universe. Newton was just the first person to describe it in a way we could all understand.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got the eternal, objective truth, gravity itself. And on the other side, you've got our human attempts to explain it. Newton's laws, absolutely brilliant, but they weren't the final word. They didn't work everywhere, which is why Einstein had to come along and refine them. The key takeaway is that our explanation of a thing isn't the thing itself.
And this brings us right back to the Vedas. According to this philosophy, the ancient sages, the rishis, they were just like Newton. Through deep, deep meditation, they didn't create new knowledge. They directly experienced these fundamental truths of the universe. Their job was basically to be a translator.
So those hymns and verses we read in the Vedas, that's the result of the translation. It's cosmic, infinite knowledge that's been encoded into something finite, like human language and poetry. It's the closest we can get to understanding a reality that's, ultimately beyond words.
But wait a minute. This raises a super important question. If these verses are a human translation, how perfect can they really be? What's their actual relationship to that cosmic truth?
It's the next logical question, isn't it? I mean, anytime a human mind is the middleman, you have to wonder if something gets lost in translation. Can we really take these verses as the absolute truth? And the answer is so incredibly nuanced. The source says they're neither. The best way to think of them is like a signpost pointing you toward a city. The signpost isn't the city, obviously, but it's absolutely essential for helping you find your way there. The verses aren't the absolute reality, but they're reliable pointers guiding you in the right direction.
And to add another layer here, the word Veda itself just means knowledge. And this knowledge is split into 2 categories. There's the lower knowledge, that's things like rituals, sciences, grammar, basically the signposts themselves. And then there's the upper knowledge, which is the direct experience of that ultimate reality that the signposts are pointing to.
So, if the ultimate goal is that direct experience, what does that mean for organized religion, for all these prescribed spiritual paths? This final section is where the whole framework we've just built starts to challenge some really fundamental assumptions. Let's start with an idea that's probably familiar. You see it in a lot of belief systems. And the logic seems pretty straightforward, right? If there's one ultimate reality, then there must be only one correct way to get there.
But our source text makes this really radical claim. It says, this is a huge misunderstanding.
The whole debate about is there one path or are there many paths, it completely misses the point. Because in reality, it says there is no path at all. A path is something outside of you.
So what is the goal then? It's not about following some external route. It's a totally internal process. All the techniques and practices are just tools to help quiet the mind's constant chatter. And the final step is to let go of the mind entirely as the main way you perceive the world.
This quote just nails it. All the divisions, the sects, the paths, the doctrines, these are all things created and experienced by the mind. The source argues that true reality is only experienced when you're situated not in your mind, but in your soul, your core consciousness. So from this perspective, some of our most deeply held ideas are actually seen as illusions of the mind. The very idea of a path, that feeling of belonging to one group instead of another, even the idea that your soul is permanently stuck to your body. These are all mental constructs that you have to go beyond.
And that leaves us with the final and maybe the most important question of all. If our explanations of reality are just pointers, and our paths are illusions of the mind, it just forces us to ask, what is the illusion, and what is truly real? It's a big question, and definitely one worth thinking about. Thanks for joining me.